Hi everyone and welcome back. So in the last couple of videos, we have covered NestJS basic lifecycle. Like we have covered a middleware, auth guard, and then we talked about how we can use Swagger module in the NestJS to expose the Open API stack on some particular URL. Now in this video, we will continue and we are going to talk about validation pipes. The pipes. And then we will talk about furthermore the other building blocks, exception filters and all for the NestJS. So this is what we were talking about. We have covered middleware and the guards. Request is going to the controller. Now, before request actually hits the controller, can we do the validation of the data? Let's say because we have used Jode. So we want that whatever the data is going to the controller body, the request body or path param or query parameter, we should be able to perform the validation. So that validation we are going to do with the validation pipe and the class validator or class transformer library. So let's take a look on to that in action, like how we are going to validate the payload request body for the HTTP post using validation pipes and the filters, validation pipes and the libraries, which are class validator and class transformer. We are going to write a DTO for the payload. So let's take a look on that in action. We are going to perform the validation of NestJS API request body. Here we are going to validate, okay, the body contains the valid email, valid types. And same you can do for the path params. Like here, I'm doing API v1 users ID. I will be validating, okay, IDs of type UUID. If you have this kind of scenario in your code, or ID should be numeric. And here I need to validate, okay, name should be of string, age should be of type number. These kind of validations we can place with the class validator and the validation pipe. Okay, let's see that. Okay, let's see this thing. So now we are talking about the validation pipe. Before that, another important thing about NestJS is NestJS provide you to register a middleware, pipes, filters, validation pipe at different level. You can set those at a controller level or at application level or even at the router level. Okay, I want to apply this auth guard only for the controller or for a particular method. Here we were doing it, if you remember, I was writing something like this, use guards, right? And here you can specify that I wanted to use auth guard only for this controller. You can register the auth guard here, or you can register auth guard at the controller level, or you can do one more thing is you can register this at the application level globally. So here you can see app.use. Here I can see lots of different things. App.use global filters, registering a filter globally, global guards. If you have any guard which you want to register globally, all these things you can apply, like use logger, use global pipes, like validation pipe you can apply globally. Interceptors, request and response interceptor you can register globally or at a controller level. Similarly, the guards and the filters you can register globally or at the controller level. That's a beauty. If you are thinking that you want to apply the validation pipe globally, then you can do it here. So here, otherwise what you will do is I will apply this is the first thing of the validation. I need to register the validation pipe. So I will be just using use pipe, I guess. And here I can pass new validation pipe and just pass the options. Okay. So use pipe, import this thing from NestJS common and this validation pipe and whitelist true, transform true. And we'll talk about what these options are. Okay, so what I'm doing, I have registered this validation pipe. There are some predefined validation pipe and some you can write by yourself. Let's say the important thing here is the ID. Let's say I don't want to write a DTO for the validation. I just want to do the validation here that this ID is of type number, should be of type number, or I should be able to transform that ID into number. So there is already a parse int pipe, parse boolean pipe we can use if you don't want to write a DTO for these things. So here, this is very simple example, and I can use some validation pipe here, simply like for delete, parse int pipe. They are not doing much. They will just take care that you are passing the number. Even if you are passing something like, okay, API v1 tasks and string number. It should be able to transform that because we are using parse int pipe, so it should be able to parse this particular number into numeric. But what if you are passing A, B, C or characters? Then obviously it will not be able to parse it and you will get a validation error. Let's try to check this thing. So here I'm doing parse int pipe, and for this body currently we don't have any validation. Let's check these things. So similarly there is lots of things like parse. Now you can see all the existing pipe: parse file pipe, parse float pipe, parse UUID pipe. Let's say if you are expecting UUID in the ID, then you can use parse UUID pipe. Let's first check parse UUID pipe. In this case, I will be expecting the ID for the put or delete me up. UUID pass karoge. Okay, so let's see this. Let's start the application and see this thing. npm run. I'm not in the correct directory. Class validator package is missing. Okay, I got it because now we have registered a validation pipe, right? So there are two packages which you need to add: a class validator and a class transformer. So I will just add a class validator and a transformer package. And I will do first npm install. So we already have the Swagger module added, .env, class transformer and class validator. I will start the application again. This time it should be running. Okay, it's already being used. So we can change one thing, we can do one thing, we can change the port. I might be running already something on this port, 3012. And let's see this on the Swagger docs. So this is the advantage of Swagger doc. I don't need to hit the APIs using Postman. I can just play around with this. Task ID, I'll passing 1, 2, 3 or something like that. And here I'm passing this task ID put, right? And it is using this 111. So API should be expecting this 111 as a UUID. So it should return bad request in the response. Okay, so I will run this thing. I'm passing UUID as a number. It is expected to be a UUID. And I'm getting internal server error. Let's see. It is complaining with this middleware guard, right? Okay, I think I know what is wrong. So we are hitting this endpoint. If you see, we are hitting tasks ID, but the middleware is only applied till API v1 task. So you need to wildcard it that API v1 task or anything which is coming under it. At that on all those routes, this particular middleware should be applied, right? So for routes, this private route, and here I'm wildcard this. That means all the routes, sub route or जितने भी routes उन पे ये middleware apply होगा. Now I think when I hit this, okay, yeah, we are getting this error, right? The value passed as UUID is not a string, right? First of all, let's say we'll just convert this into a string. Then ID must be a number, right? So these validation errors, because we have applied them, we have entered these validations using parse boolean pipe and all. It is, let me just enter the number. It is a number, but it's not a UUID, right? So let's see what all validations we have applied here. Okay, so here we are passing parse UUID pipe. So we can just convert it into the right way is parse int pipe. And what should happen? Should be parse int happen. Okay, this is the correct one, not just parse int. Okay, what should happen with this DTO? I mean, we are passing this payload, and how can we do the validation for this? We have added a class validator, right? So create task DTO, and here I can start adding the validations. Like, okay, This is string is defined. Even you can add these min length and max length. I think this is coming from class validator. Min length should be 4. Okay, name, this is for the name. And the same thing I can add for description. The minimum length is 10. Right, string defined, it should be there. This is optional, right? So we can just say, mark it as a is optional. Whenever you add is optional, all the other validation rules gets removed from that particular property. So this is the validation rule I have added for the property. And for the same, I already have a DTO. You see, create task DTO. All the validation rules are applied on this DTO class, and which is nothing but a payload body. So here, if I try to create a task, internal server error. I think that's the same thing. Same error which I am expecting. This error is coming from the same middleware auth guard. What's wrong this time? Our main module. So it is not being used. Let me, if I just use it like this, then I think the validation middleware will get applied. And I start getting the message. The description must be longer than 5 or 10 characters. If I am not passing one of the properties, then it will say it is required. Validation message gets longer now, right? Name should be required, not null, and should be defined longer. Length property, name must be a string, description must be a string, and length should be 10. Right? Let's fix this middleware part. How we can apply middleware in such a way that all these routes gets covered inside it. Yeah, we can do one thing is, let's say I can have 2 different route definitions for the private route, tasks and tasks wildcard. So all the post method is also covered here. And both these routes we are passing in the private routes. Okay, so this is simple validation. I mean, it's not like we are doing a simple validation. Validation can be done in different scenarios. Even like here we are using these validation pipes. I don't want to use a validation pipe. I want to use the DTO class. Let's convert them into DTO. So what I need to do for these, okay, let's convert them into DTO. Then I will be using, okay, param. And here is create task. This is like task by ID DTO, right? Task by ID DTO. This I will define, because this is a path param, so you need to use a @param. When it is a query, then in that case you need to use @query. I mean, these are all definitions. Here you can use @body, right? Here you can use @query, because you can send data in these different formats using query parameter, path parameter, or inside body. I'm using task by ID DTO, and there I will define the validation criterias, because currently I'm just typecasting it into a number. That should not be needed once I do that. So we will be using DTO everywhere. So I can just define export class task by ID DTO, and here I can just use ID. ID is of type number, right? So this is name ID, required true, and here is a number is defined, and ID is of type number. And then you can just import this thing, task by ID DTO, inside your controller. And I think that will fix everything. So here we need to pass the param dot ID. Okay, so I mean, instead of using the parse int pipe, parse boolean pipe, parse float pipe, I always prefer to create a DTO class for even for query parameter, path parameter, or request body. So this is ID should match with the ID which you have defined here. Now the same rule will get applied. Here we have explicitly written them. If the ID is a UUID, then you can use something like this, is UUID. Okay, so let's see this thing in action. So you can see ID must be a UUID. Okay, rules applied. I don't need to make this as a UUID. This is fine as a number. And validation is passing. ID must be a number conforming to the specified constraint. How do we have any min length, max length? IDs of defined number. This is my controller. So here I can pass the validation 1 and here it is not found. This validation is also passing. I mean, sometimes you need to play with these options which you are passing at the controller level in the validation pipe, because all the query parameter and path parameter are passed as a string. Always remember, you need to implicitly enable the implicit conversion. If I remove this option, the picture will be different. So if I even try to pass the number, it will complain, right? ID must be a number conforming to a specified constraint. So I need to implicit convert that string into a number and everything works fine now, right? So this is all about validation pipes. So what all we have validated here, we are using these DTO classes even for body, path parameter, query parameter, and in the path parameter or query parameter, you can add n number of arguments, like in the body here, like if you have multiple IDs which you are passing, let's say the ID, then let's say the user ID, something like that, right? Then you can also add a user ID in the same task by ID, user ID DTO. Okay, so it's all about adding a class validator to the class. So here we are just using these different rules which are coming from class validator: min length, max length, is string, is UUID, is number, is boolean, all that. So we will talk about this topic in depth in the advance when you want to validate the nested payload in the request body, right? So that's it about the request validation using validation pipes.